The Flushing girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.
Welcome back to another exciting episode of Oh, Mr. Sheffield, a podcast in which two people who are friends talk about The Nanny, which is a sitcom from the 90s because we're old. I am Shandi Pasquale here with...
the slightly younger Toria Sheffield.
That's right. We are far apart in age, but not far enough that it matters to anyone under the age of 25. This week, we are talking about Season 2, Episode 17, The Will. This episode was directed by a new guy, Randy Bennett. Yep, that's right. Randy Bennett. We've never heard that name before. It had a story by Robbie Schwartz and a teleplay by Fran and Peter. So, Toria, what was this episode? Do you want to do your quick summary?
Sure. This is the episode where Fran finds out that Mr. Sheffield is putting her in his will and then mistakenly thinks he's dying.
Yes.
And so there's some real shenanigans that happen because of that misunderstanding.
It's a real classic, mistaken identity for lack of a better term, but it's a real oops, classic mix-up episode.
Yes, it's a classic mix-up where then a lot of hijinks happen because Fran is under the impression that Mr. Sheffield is, imminently going to depart this earth. And we start this episode, as we often do at the breakfast table, and we start off by learning that Mr. Sheffield is scheduled for a physical that day. And then we also very quickly established the B and C plot. And that's that, the B plot is little Gracie has a friend coming over, and, a lot is made of that because usually her friends are imaginary. And, this doesn't really ever come into play later, but we do know that Maggie is working on a family tree for school. And it did make me laugh, that you find out that Mr. Sheffield is one of the only members of his family to not have a title in front of his name. And she's like, except for Uncle Bill. Oh, but he thinks he's a leprechaun.
Yeah.
So only Mr. Sheffield and his insane brother do not have official titles.
Which, by the way, I now would like to pitch a new spin-off show for this. And it's about the uncle who thinks he's a leprechaun. Fran has to go live with him to caretake for him or something. Or maybe Fran and Mr. Sheffield both end up having to go live, or he moves in with them. I think that's so whimsical. That really captured. I was like, ooh, I love that.
I'd actually be interested to dig into what, I know that they go for gold at the end of Rainbows, but I don't know what else they do in sort of Irish Celtic lore. Are they mischievous?
They're mischievous. They protect their gold. They slide around on rainbows. They
love children's cereal.
Yeah, they also live internal lives, Toria. Every living creature. They all have their own emotions.
There's a universe within every leprechaun.
They go through divorce.
They suffer from seasonal affective disorder. I'm sure some of them do.
They do. I mean, not all of them. Listen, they're not a monolith.
You're right.
Everyone's different.
But anyway, that's neither here nor there. We're at the breakfast table. Mr. Sheffield's going to have a physical, and Gracie has a little friend coming over. And in the next scene, it's Niles and Cece are in Mr. Sheffield's office. And Niles is basically torturing Cece by saying, I know something you don't know. And at first she pretends not to care until he reveals that he knows that Nanny Fine is in Mr. Sheffield's will. And it's actually not as, salacious as you think. He's leaving her the children.
Right.
But not to be their custodians, but I think he says should anything happen to me, I want her to continue on as their nanny, wherever they end up being. And he says he found that out while, quote, cleaning the extension phone.
Yes.
Which is very funny.
Which means he was just listening to a call with Mr. Sheffield and his lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's established. And then Mr. Sheffield comes in and he declares that Doug Emerson, who is Andrew Lloyd Webber's biggest investor, is coming over for dinner. And I Googled this. For a second, I was like, is Doug Emerson a real theater guy in New York. No, it's just a made up character. But he's coming over for dinner, and Mr. Sheffield is, hoping to woo him away from Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Right.
And there was also this scene that follows that at first I thought was a little disappointing, but then I thought about it. I'm like, no, it kind of makes sense. This is when Mr. Sheffield sits Fran down and tells her that he would like her to stay on as the children's nanny after he dies. And he would like to make it official by her signing this document. And at first I thought that was going to be like a really big moving moment, and I was kind of like looking forward to, her being like, of course they will, or like, what does this mean for us? Or it kind of like makes her more part of the family, but she kind of very much blows past it. And I thought that was a missed opportunity until I realized, no, Fran is the type of person that hates talking about like will death stuff. She's basically like, I don't want to talk about this. Like almost like it's bad luck or bad juju to even like be making these plans. So that's why she kind of just, doesn't sit down and really like let that breathe. But she does at first think he's actually proposing to her, because when he first phrases it, he sits down and goes and takes her hand and he goes, "Miss Fine, I have a very important proposal." And that was played for a few laughs, but it didn't really pay off into, it wasn't like a big plot point.
No, and she never like followed up on like, hey man, maybe just watch the way you word things.
Or like, and they were never like, oh, don't we think it's very uncomfortable that she was like willing to say yes.
No. We also have at one point, she says, "I'll never doubt Jeannie Dixon again" in that scene. And I had to look this up. But did you know who Jeannie Dixon
I looked
was?
it up.
Yeah, no, I didn't remember this person, but apparently she was a very famous American psychic.
Yes, a very famous American psychic who I think got most famous for predicting the assassination of JFK.
Anyone could have predicted that. I mean, come on.
Who didn't want that guy to?
Exactly.
But so I think it was like 1956 or 57. She said a blonde, blue-eyed, handsome man will be elected president in 1960, and he will be assassinated in 1963.
Also not a shocker. She's like, a white guy's going to get elected president.
Well, but to be fair, most presidents were not handsome up until that point.
That's true. Then we get basically into the meat of the episode, which I would say happened probably about 12 minutes into a 22-minute episode. We see Niles is cooking, and we establish that he's cooking a special menu for the guest who has heart disease. And then we get a scene where Fran walks into the kitchen and sees the menu and thinks it's Mr. Sheffield's menu from his doctor visit. And then Gracie is upset because her friend is weirdly into Brighton.
Well, they're sitting around having this tea party, which I laughed because Fran is so comfortable at this children's tea party. Like, it's as if she's sitting around gabbing with a couple of her girls from Flushing and basically giving them life advice. And Brighton walks in, and the little friend, Erica, sees him, and we see how she perceives him, which is like a cool guy in a leather jacket on a motorcycle.
Yes.
And she instantly becomes obsessed and infatuated and starts following him around.
Okay, but also just remember, listeners, that when Erica sees Brighton and has like a fantasy about him, he is fully clothed, wearing like a biker jacket, leaning against a motorcycle. That's how she fantasizes. That's important to remember for later.
I know where you're going with the button on this.
Oh man!
But also, I did like the line where Gracie's really upset, and she's like, "Ew! Like I can't believe she's into Brighton." And Fran goes, "Honey, to you he's just an obnoxious brother, but to your friends, he's 79 pounds of pure stud muffin," which is like very, very true. I think like for siblings that are close in age, there was always like, crushing on the older siblings.
Sure. All my little sister's friends had a crush on me at some point.
Sure they did.
They loved me. Oh, they loved me.
Okay, but so yes, we established that, which does kind of, it's definitely going to come back for something we'll talk about later. I know where you're going with that.
Okay, so then we get this beat where Fran thinks Mr. Sheffield is dying. She sees the menu and she's like, oh no, he's got heart disease and he has to eat all these special foods.
And it adds up. He's been talking about the will. He had his physical.
Yes. And then she grabs, is that Gracie or Maggie? It's Gracie, right?
Yeah, it's Maggie, the eldest.
All right, it's Maggie. Maggie walks in and she just turns around and grabs her and she sings "Nothing's Gonna Harm You" from Sweetie Todd, which I got a very big kick out of. She's like, "Nothing's gonna harm you, not while I'm around." She like rubs her back.
Yes. Like to totally bewilder Maggie. Yes. But yeah, so you're right. That comes relatively late. Like the crux of the episode is this big misunderstanding that's going to unfold, which of course is going to be played up for big comedic beats because this big investor is coming over for dinner. And in fact, Fran is so worked up over this, but that she asks Val, who was there earlier in the day, to come all the way back to sort of give her some moral support for the evening. And at one point, Fran even goes, she's like, and then, they're going to ship me off to live with his sister in England, which is the way that it's England. I can't even say it the way Fran does. And she goes, and they're closer to my side of the family anyway. They may look British, but they think Yiddish.
I wrote this down too. I thought that was a great line. Also, when Val walks in, she's like, "Val, I'm so sorry you had to come all the way back here in the middle of the night." And Val goes, "How hard is it to wait for 2 trains, a bus, and then cut through Central Park at night?"
Yeah, she says it completely earnestly. She's like, "Not a problem." She's like, she's just that friend.
And Central Park, cutting through Central Park at night in the 90s was like a very risky.
It's so scary.
She's a tough broad, that Val.
And
also, we skipped over. So there's right before Val comes over is when we have the sort of second setup of like Gracie is upset that Erica is into Brighton. And there's this weird scene where she's like complaining to Fran, and then Fran is like, Gracie like follows Brighton into the bathroom and he has to like shoo her out, and then he goes in the bathroom and Fran says, "Brighton's going to be in the bathroom for a while. My bra magazine from Sears is in there." And this is not the first time that they have made a joke about like Brighton fucking yanks it to
it's so gross.
It's
Sears so gross. I mean, I guess the thing is he's like 12 now. I'm sure it's accurate. It's just
I'm sure it's just weird. It still feels like they don't know what to do with the character, because there's also a moment in a coming up in the next episode where he is basically played as like a mini Alex P. Keaton from Family Ties, which is also something we've tagged them on before, where he's like, "I'm a young Republican," and you're like, what is this character? Like,
no, I'm not that. No, I'm not bothered by it, but I do. I'm actually okay. I think he sometimes has his redeeming moments, and sometimes he's obnoxious 12-year-old boy. I've grown at peace with Brighton recently.
All right, if you say so.
To me, it was way less his little young republicanisms, and it was way more his, seeming to have pop culture references that clearly the writers thought were funny that no 12-year-old would have. That actually irks me much more. And it seems fairly accurate to me that this little 12-year-old rich boy in Manhattan would be.
He's like a young Republican obsessed with masturbation.
I think obsessed is unfair. I think there is an age when children are very hormonal, when teens and tweens are hormonal.
Sure. But you got to figure, we're not seeing every day of their lives. At most, we're seeing 27 days of 365 days of the year. And of those 27 that we're privy to, he's masturbated multiple times.
Well, and then because it's right before dinner, and Fran's like, "Val, like, thank you for coming over." She's like, "I'm just going to have to be strong for this dinner." We cut to the dinner party. Fran is sobbing. Cece literally throws a roll at her head. And then that's where we get this scene. It's just very, it's very sitcom-y.
It's a lot of physical comedy.
Yes. And the whole premise of this scene is Fran thinks that Mr. Sheffield is the one who needs to adhere to this strict diet. So every time that Niles, puts salt on Mr. Sheffield's plate or anything heavy with cream or anything that wouldn't be heart healthy, she finds a way to divert it off his plate and like put it on the other guy's plate. And the other guy's sort of this big hefty guy who's just, shoveling food in his mouth basically. And he's the one who actually shouldn't be eating this stuff. And it literally culminates with, it was so gross, actually. Niles is pouring Hollandaise sauce onto Mr. Sheffield's plate. Fran catches it in her hands and then claims that it's very good moisturizer for her dry skin. Which it just was so gross. It was like a creamy, thick sauce.
It's a hollandaise.
Yeah, and so
disgusting.
Mr. Sheffield is getting like increasingly agitated with her behavior to the point where, and this is where I was like, this seems a little ungrounded. He's like, Miss Fine, may I have a word with you? And she's like, of course. And so they both stand up and he throws her over his shoulder and carries her out into the kitchen, which I think was almost far more obviously disruptive and crazy than anything she was doing.
Yeah.
Because she was at least sort of covering up her strange behavior by making weird excuses for it.
Yes.
But I was like a little much. But so then they get into the kitchen and, they seem to, he's like, you've gone insane. Has that, all that hair dye finally seeped through into your brain? And then it comes out that like she thinks he is dying and has a heart problem, and they clear it up and they, have a good laugh about it.
She goes, it's like Shakespeare once said, these are the days of our lives.
yeah. Like the sands of time. These are the days of our lives. Yeah. And they, but the thing is they realize how funny it is that she's been diverting all this unhealthy food to the actually unhealthy guy's plate, at which point we cut to an ambulance in a hospital. He's clearly been taken to the ER, but we find out he's going to be fine. And that's, and that's how it gets resolved. And then the real little button, as Sean alluded to earlier,
she signs the will. Fran does sign. She ends up signing the will and getting the, making it official.
And I will say, cute little moment in this episode when they're at the hospital, the doctor comes out and tells them that, this guy's going to be fine. He just had like gas, basically. And they start, putting on, Fran and Mr. Sheffield start putting on their coats to go back to the house. And the way they do it, it's so familiar and it's so, couple-like. Like he helps her with her coat. And then when she buttons up her coat, she picks up his scarf and wraps it around his neck, like just as they're casually talking. And it was really funny because she was just like, I'm so glad this is all behind us. And she's like, when we get home, I want to sign that paper right away. And then she goes, wait a second. What if I go first? He looks at her and he goes, then I'll still keep them because they're my children, which was a very funny moment.
Yeah, it was.
And then the little button, which this is a scene that is directly juxtaposed to that little girl, meeting Brighton and seeing him as this, cool guy with a leather jacket.
Right. So then, two things happen. First, we get the bizarre news from Fran that Erica is over Brighton because she's, quote, made up with her boyfriend, which I just like, this girl is 11. But
that was the whole thing when they were having that little tea party. She was talking to that girl about how she needs to move on from this guy. And then Gracie goes, she can't dump him. He has all her stickers. So... But I would say this, there was definitely, when I was that age, these very performative little relationships between guys and girls. Like not everyone was doing it, but there was definitely like a couple that, lasted for like 3 days and then had a breakup.
That's true.
It wasn't actually, it was all very innocent, I would say.
Yeah. And then Brighton kind of rolls his eyes, and then Maggie's friend Pamela shows up at the house, and we see now Brighton's fantasy, and Maggie's friend is wearing a bikini.
No. That's not what happened.
She's dressed like
she's wearing a Baywatch. Literally that exact orange one piece that is like iconically Baywatch. And I actually have the note. I don't know how many of our younger viewers get that reference as a Baywatch reference.
Sure, which was like Pamela Anderson was a big chested blonde lady who ran down the beach in a one piece on a TV show that was supposedly about lifeguards, but it was really just about like putting hot chicks in bathing suits.
I think Baywatch might be the most watched show internationally of all time.
Yeah, they made a sequel called Baywatch Nights in which they investigated supernatural occurrences.
And
that's true.
It ran for many, many seasons. So that was it. And the fact that her friend was named Pamela is a direct little shout out to that. My note was that poor girl, because You can tell she's not super comfortable, like in the bathing suit while trying to look sexy.
Yes,
like,
because she's a 16-year-old girl.
Yeah, yeah. But so
be on the nanny. Oh, in this bikini. Okay.
But here's the thing. The defense I'll have of this creative choice. Well, I don't think it's it's not fair that this girl had to do that on TV. I do think, yes, a 9-year-old girl's fantasy of a cute boy would be very different from a 12-year-old boy's fantasy of a cute girl.
Sure.
And I think it was accurate. I think, little 8 and 9-year-old girls are not, like picturing the 12-year-old boy like naked, taking off his shirt. But the 12-year-old boy
why wouldn't she have pictured him like the men in Baywatch who were in
because
holding like a surfboard or whatever? Because
at that age, having been an 8, 9-year-old girl myself, and this actually, I was kind of a late bloomer.
You were super into motorcycles?
No. I'll say it had nothing to do with anything sexual. Like you didn't have that part of yourself yet. So it was like imagining the like accoutrement of what was happening. Like, oh, he'd be on a motorcycle. That's cool. Or like we'd be, doing this activity together. It truly had nothing to do with like a physical body. You thought they had a cute face and that was probably it. But there was no libido. But for a 12-year-old boy,
it's all libido.
As we've already established,
it's all libido. That's fair.
Yes.
Well, on that note, I think it's probably time for segments.
Yeah.
And now segments.
So segments.
Yeah, no, I think we should move on to segments.
We can move on to our segments.
And now segments.
Segments with Sean and Toria.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
What you got for me? Favorite lines.
We went over some of them, but one of mine was right up in one of the first scenes. Mr. Sheffield comes in excitedly and he goes, "I've pulled a major coup." He's referring to getting this investor to come over. But Fran goes, "Oh, that'll clear itself up. Just sleep on your side and wear boxer shorts." That made me laugh.
What did you think it was?
Something with probably his
groin? Like, I couldn't understand. I was like, what does coup sound like?
I don't know. She clearly didn't know what it meant. And we actually did go over most of my other favorite lines. Like
I like the line where she starts telling him something and he goes, "What's the moral of this story?" And she goes, "Ugh, everything has to have a moral. What am I, Mother Goose?"
Yeah.
Which I thought was a very funny line.
Yes. And of course there was they might look British, but they think Yiddish.
Yes. I also liked how hard is it to wait for 2 trains, a bus, and cut through Central Park at night.
Yeah.
And the Shakespeare line, like Shakespeare once said, like the sands of time, these are the days of our lives. She says it so earnestly.
Yes.
Like
no, I mean, this was an episode where I kind of knew I was doing this, but I couldn't help it. I was saying all my favorite lines as we went.
Yeah, same.
And in terms of favorite moment, I did love that little moment when they were helping each other put their coats and winter gear on, because those are just very they're very natural and very meaningful.
I liked all the business at the table. I really liked her trying to stop him from eating salt and butter and hollandaise sauce on her hands, and it was silly, but I thought it was. I don't know. I thought it was funny.
And in terms of nanny trivia, this is less trivia and more just something interesting of note. And Sean, I sent this to you last week. Yeah. But I have a friend named Jessica who's been binge watching The Nanny, and so she'll often send me things she's noticed or her own takes on things. And she actually noticed that in a lot of the exterior shots of the Sheffield mansion, there is this very DIY blue tarp around an AC unit in one of the windows.
Yes.
And it's in like almost all of these of the exterior shots. And it looks
like stock shots. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so unclassy. It's like it's such an eyesore. And it must have just been there the day that they happened to take that B-roll, and then they use that B-roll for like many seasons. And that made me chuckle. Like, you know, oh, what a funny little thing to like be there for eternity now.
But also kind of classic New York, you know? Like, I feel like, I mean, they clearly shot that on location in New York outside of a brownstone.
Sure. And
it's like, yeah, of course, like even in the nicest apartment, it's New York, so there's some messed up tarp hanging out of a building.
Yes.
You know,
and yes, and so you know, I looked it up. The actual building, it's 7 East 75th Street, super close to the east side of Central Park. It's by I looked it up on Google Maps. I mean, this is by so many incredible, iconic museums. It's, you know, hey, they're not kidding. I had
a friend who lived on the east side, and for a good year and a half, they had scaffolding and like construction in front of their like beautiful apartment. So it doesn't really surprise me, you know, because like that shit just goes on sometimes.
Yeah, it does. I mean, you got to maintain the infrastructure, but
you got to maintain it.
But also, just so people know, even though it was used as, you know, the Sheffield residence, it's actually not a single family home, and it wasn't back then. I'm sure it was at one point.
Well, that explains the AC unit.
Yes. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, I'm sure it was initially, but even by the time they were filming and The Nanny, it was apartments. But I say, if we go to New York for the Nanny musical, we have to make a pilgrimage there.
Hell yeah, we do. We have to take pictures in front of it.
No, what if I'm like, no, we tell no one.
Also, they made a couple of digs at Sunset Boulevard, which is an Andrew Lloyd Webber musical. And my only trivia is that this show is a time capsule because they were making digs at how the investor lost money on Sunset Boulevard, which ended up being a very successful musical for Andrew Lloyd Webber. And it won like Tonys, I think, and shit. Yeah, like a bunch of them in 1995. But before that, when it first premiered in London, it got like very mixed reviews. And so like this must have been written just before all of that, when people were like, ugh, it's bad. And then they obviously like worked out all the kinks, and it did very well. Glenn Close starred in it eventually here on Broadway. And it was a good show. It's actually one of one Andrew Lloyd Webber show that I truly enjoy. But one of two Andrew Lloyd Webber shows that I can listen to and not feel pain.
What's the other one?
Phantom of the Opera. I really like Phantom a lot.
Oh, okay, that's fair. Sorry.
Yeah, I love Phantom. It's very catchy. But Sunset Boulevard is fantastic. If you've never listened to it, it's fantastic. Listen to the original Broadway cast recording. It's so fun. I think it's like the most fun. I think it's his most fun musical.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
It's pretty cool. I mean, it is the movie Sunset Boulevard, just with music to it. So,
and in terms of the Yiddish, it's a word we've gotten several times before. It was schlepped. You know, at one point, Fran goes, "That was one schlep down the stairs I could have done without." But nothing, you know, new or earth shattering there.
No.
And then for the Fran or the Cece, I went, we're both Frans. If someone we even knew tangentially died and had 3 children, we'd probably be like, I will like take care of you.
Yes.
Like you like need not worry. And then, you know, someone else would be like, no. We have many more appropriate people to
take care of you.
To actually take care of you. We'd be like, no. You're safe now.
I'll do it. Shh.
Yeah, no, I think we would definitely take that on if we ever had to. You know, we both are. I was going to say we're both uncles to nieces. We're both
uncles. It's true.
We both have nieces, and I think, you know,
Doug Emerson, by the way, from this episode, our younger audience, might know him better as Taylor Deuce on Gilmore Girls, because he was on that show for many, 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 many episodes. And then he was back for the Netflix show revival that they did. So he was on that show a lot.
Very cool. Interesting.
So that's where that guy comes from. I never watched Gilmore Girls, so I don't know who Taylor Deuce is, but
Taylor Deuce.
Taylor Deuce. All right. Well, so thank you everybody for listening. This was another fantastic episode of The Nanny. Shout out to the audience, the audience that we have apparently in Seattle. We have like a huge listenership in Seattle. So what up, Seattle?
Hi guys, you got to come visit.
Come visit. Oh no,
we
should go
I
visit.
said we should.
No, you guys should come here. I don't like to travel.
Well, I've never been to Seattle. Well, I've been to the airport.
So if you are from Seattle and you love the show, let us know. Go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review, 5-star review, and tell people how much you like the show. That helps other people find us. And we can all be consolidated under one roof, or find us online at Oh Mr. Chef Pod. That's with 2 F's. Oh Mr. Chef Pod on Twitter and on Instagram. And listen, be excellent to each other. All right.
That's not his line, younger viewers. Don't think it is. Don't be fooled.
Be excellent to each other. I am Sean DePasquale.
Party on.
We'll party on. Party on, Toria. We'll see you next time on Oh Mr. Sheffield.
Swing.
Bye.
Goodbye.
The Flashing Girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
I go, Miss Fine.